those figures come along and they actually shape then Christianity, or evangelical Christianity, in the States and in Great Britain moving forward. So what were the big shifts that they put an emphasis on that carry on even today?
Spurgeon, in a sense, was defeated. Spurgeon was the champion of a traditional Puritan form of Calvinistic theology, and that was going out of popularity in the late 19th century. He also was very troubled by the rise of various broadening theological influences stemming largely from the Romantic movement. Romanticism tended to make people have less eagerness to define doctrine and more willingness to accept mistiness where doctrine previously had been. A lot of the more liberal theologians in the evangelical world, still within the evangelical world, but liberalizing in the late 19th century, were much less inclined to be definite about doctrines, most obviously the atonement, but also other doctrines too, where they were vaguer than their predecessors had been. Spurgeon was alarmed. He therefore encouraged one of his lieutenants to write articles in the late 1880s speaking of a downgrade that was affecting the churches. The downgrade controversy was the result within the Baptist Union. Spurgeon tried to carry other Baptists with him, but he didn't. He therefore resigned from the Baptist Union. It was a great shock to his contemporaries, and that affected a broader evangelical world too, including in North America. But the split was most obviously felt within Baptist circles in Britain. He left. Very few people left the Baptist Union with him. In a sense, therefore, he was defeated the downgrade controversy. But that was the first shot across the bows in England, there'd already been one in Scotland, against these liberalizing theological trends, of which he, I think, discerned the consequences being even more drastic negation of traditional Christian theological positions. And that shot across the bows was, in a sense, one of the opening rounds in what became the fundamentalist controversies of the 1920s. They were not confined to America. They affected Britain too. They affected the whole Anglo world, much more strident in the States than in Britain, but nevertheless they did affect the world of the evangelicals in 20th century in Britain too. And that made for a split between conservative evangelicals and liberal evangelicals. Spurgeon was, as it were, anticipating that polarization in the 20th century. Moving to Moody, Moody actually provided a theological scheme which was more acceptable than Calvinism as such to the late 19th century mind. It was a sort of generic evangelicalism, focusing very definitely on the atonement. One of his greatest sermons was on the blood, which he preached on many occasions. And he made that the fulcrum of his system, but also insisted on all sorts of other aspects of the traditional evangelical body of faith, but without any distinctive angularities. And what Moody taught was the normative form of evangelical theology in the States and in Britain during the 20th century. Some people added extra positions. Some Methodist evangelicals said, oh, we're Arminians, and some Reformed evangelicals said, oh, we're Calvinists, but nevertheless they shared very largely in the standard position that Moody set out. And just like Spurgeon's sermons, Moody's sermons were read again and again and again in the 20th century. In particular,